Conspiracies often remain as nothing more than theories because, for the most part, they seem outrageous and unbelievable. And oftentimes, regardless of physical and circumstantial evidence, these theories are pushed aside, and those who continue to talk about them are considered to be crazy. A conspiracy, as defined in the dictionary, is a secret plan by a group to do something unlawful or harmful, which in itself doesn't seem too crazy.
I'm Christy Nicola, born July of 1962, rendering me 32 years of age. I was a subject in radiation as well as mind control and drug experiments performed by a man I knew as Dr. Green. My parents were divorced around 1966, and Donald Richard Ebner, my natural father, was involved with Dr. Green in the experiments. I was a subject from 1966 to 1976. Dr. Green performed radiation experiments on me in 1970, focusing on my neck, throat, and chest, 1972 focusing on my chest, and my uterus in 1975.
Governments have often conspired against their people, usually to push a political or corporate agenda. But the main problem, like I mentioned, is believability. People reject conspiracy theories because they refuse to believe that people can be so cruel and corrupt, despite the plethora of evidence that is rampant throughout history showing these incredible cases of cruelty and corruption. On the 14th of August 1971, Stanford University conducted one of the most revealing experiments that shed light on the horrible truth of humanity. The Stanford Prison Experiment was an attempt to investigate the psychological effects of perceived power, focusing on the struggle between prisoner and prison guards. It was conducted by a research group led by psychology professor Philip Zimbardo using college students. It was funded by the US Offices of Naval Research as an investigation into the causes of difficulties between guards and prisoners in the United States Navy and the United States Marine Corps. Some participants developed their roles as the guards and enforced authoritarian measures and ultimately subjected some prisoners to psychological torture. Many of the prisoners passively accepted the psychological abuse and, by the guards' request, actively harassed the other prisoners who tried to stop it. Zimbardo, in his role as the superintendent, allowed abuse to continue. But as the experiment continued, things got worse and a hell of a lot darker, and the experiment came to an abrupt end after only 6 days. The entire experiment was supposed to be filmed, but only a small portion of the footage was ever released to the public. But Zimbardo later admitted that the guards were doing inhumane things to the prisoners, which led him to the following conclusions. The line between good and evil is permeable, and almost anyone can be induced to cross it when pressured by situational forces. I learned that people easily forget that others are humans. It took only a small experiment and 6 days to reveal that we are easily corruptible, and if just given a few moments of absolute power, we will abuse it. So now that Dr. Philip Zimbardo has proven that, and I quote, human behavior is extremely pliable, plastic, and we now know that even the average Joe has the potential to do the most inhumane things to another person. The focus is on those with great power. And what exactly is one of the most inhumane things someone can do? Pedophilia. And exactly how common is pedophilia among the powerful? Far too common.
In a Philadelphia courtroom today, a high-ranking Catholic clergyman learned he is heading to jail for covering up a sex abuse scandal in his church. The judge was scathing, saying he deliberately chose not to protect children from monsters in their midst.
Take a look at Catholicism. Pedophilia is a Catholic epidemic and not an isolated case within the Vatican. Legal reports have been swarming in from Australia, Austria, Belgium, Canada, the Dominican Republic, India, Ireland, Northern Ireland, Norway, Poland, and the United States. Studies show that 10% of the clergy of each Catholic group across the entire world are pedophiles, and that number reached 20% from the 60s to the 80s.
As more and more allegations of historical child abuse, sex abuse comes to light, inevitably the more focus is placed on how our police forces handle these important matters. And we know that this operation was closed without any charges being brought. But it's now agreed that the allegations of historical child sex abuse that gave rise to Operation Midland were mishandled at best and shambolic at worst.
In 1984, a dossier on pedophiles allegedly associated with the British government was assembled by the British Member of Parliament, Geoffrey Dickens, who handed it to then Home Secretary Leon Brittan. The whereabouts of that dossier is unknown, along with other files on organised child abuse that had been held by the Home Office. It took 9 years to convince the government to conduct an official investigation into the disappearance of that dossier. And on the 7th of July 2014, the Home Secretary, Theresa May, announced a review into the handling of historic child abuse allegations, to be led by Peter Wanless, Chief Executive of the NSPCC, and the establishment of a public panel, inquiry to the duty of care taken in the protection of children from pedophiles by British public institutions, led by an independent panel of experts and chaired by Baroness Butler Sloss. But she later stood down as chair of the inquiry. I wonder why. This delayed the investigation another 5 months, and on the 5th of September 2015, Fiona Woolf took over, but she resigned like 1 month later. Then, on the 4th of February 2015, it was announced that the inquiry would be chaired by Justice Lowell Goddard, an outsider not involved with British politics, a New Zealand High Court judge. She disbanded the entire panel and demanded new powers, and bam! 9 high-ranking British officials were linked to a pedophile ring. This includes Harvey Proctor, a gay conservative and former member of British Parliament. Lord Brittan, the former Tory Home Secretary, remains the most high-profile VIP to be accused of child abuse as a part of the Operation Midland. Operation Midland, of course, being the investigation into this child sex ring. All allegations against him have been ignored, and the authorities refuse to investigate, let alone question him. He's a powerful guy with a lot of powerful allies, and it is extremely suspicious that he was the man that misplaced the dossier. Field Marshal Lord Bramall, former Chief of Defence Staff, and despite circumstantial evidence, not arrested. Sir Edward Heath, former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, passed away on the 17th of July 2005, never charged. Lord Janner, the 87-year-old former Labour MP, has faced 4 police investigations into child abuse, starting in 1991. Enough evidence has been found to link him to the child sex ring, but he's still not going to court because he suffers from dementia. He has technically been pardoned. General Sir Hugh Beach, Second World War veteran who served as Deputy Commander-in-Chief, accusations against him were ruled as a smear, never questioned, never investigated. Sir Michael Handley, the Director General of MI5 from 1971 to 1978. Sir Maurice Oldfield, former Director of MI6, died in 1981, has numerous allegations made against him, and was linked to the Kincora children's home abuse scandal in Belfast in the 1970s. Most of these men already had serious allegations made against them. Most of them were ignored and never investigated, up until 2016, when these men were too old to convict and imprison. Although these men got away with child rape, this proves that there is a child sex ring operating within the United Kingdom that some of the highest ranking officials have access to. Although there have been no arrests made, and there has been minimal media coverage in the United Kingdom about this, the evidence is there, and these pedophiles are being slowly exposed.
And the Mirror says BBC bosses have snubbed a call by David Cameron to launch a full investigation into the Jimmy Savile sex abuse scandal. The Prime Minister said claims about the late start were shocking and urged the corporation to hold an urgent inquiry.
Pedophilia is usually brushed under the rug, but sometimes it is celebrated by the entertainment industry. Many celebrities have spoke out about pedophilia within Hollywood and the BBC, but these pedophiles are protected by mainstream media and their colleagues. Take Jimmy Savile, for instance, one of Prince Charles' best friends, and a known pedophile, despite receiving over 100 complaints and charges made against him during his time at the BBC. BBC refused to fire him and even acknowledged the fact that he was a pedophile. Despite knowing this, they continued to star him in shows where he was surrounded by little kids, and even cast and crew members witnessed him sexually abusing little children on set. but were told to keep quiet about it.
The fella could get used to all this, as it happens, he really could get used to it. So, ladies and gentlemen, all we can say is good night from all of us here on Top of the Pops, and it's number one time, and of course, if you believe me now, it's from the one and only, She Can't.
After too much undeniable evidence started to surface and his pedophilic tendencies made international news, the BBC were forced to make a public apology and they stopped showing reruns of his show. But he died at the age of 85 and was never charged. Even Disney celebrates the work of pedophiles. Peter Pan, one of my favorite Disney movies growing up, is probably one of the most disturbing stories, if you know its context and the story behind it. In 1898, Barry met a pair of boys in Kensington Gardens, an expanse adjacent to London's Hyde Park. George and Jack Llewellyn Davies, aged 5 and 4, were walking with their nurse. Barry began to see them there repeatedly, and he befriended them. Soon after, he met their parents, Sylvia and Arthur. Later, 3 more sons were born, Peter, Michael and Nico. The Davies clan began to let Barry into their lives, and gradually Barry became Uncle Jim. Peter Pan made his first appearance in The Little White Bird, Barry's thinly veiled novel about George Llewellyn Davies that, today, with our sensitivity to sexual predators, has a creepy tone. In the book, a boy named David is befriended by the narrator, who pretends to have a son of his own who died. He uses this lie to create empathy with David's parents. The narrator is particularly excited that David's mother, Mary, has been duped, which allows him to, quote, take David utterly from her and make him mine. One passage in the book even goes as far to give a detailed description of pedophilia. J.M. Barrie wrote, I lay thinking of this little boy who, in the midst of his play while I undressed him, had suddenly buried his head on my knees, of David's dripping little form in the bath, and how I essayed to catch him as he slipped from my arms like a trout, of how I had stood at the open door listening to his sweet breathing, had stood so long I forgot his name. Within the novel, the narrator invents a story about a magical boy named Peter Pan, who never grows old, and who lives in Kensington Gardens. In his biography, J.M. Barrie and the Lost Boys, Andrew Birkin stresses that despite it all, he doesn't believe that Barrie was a sexual predator of children. Barrie, he says, was a lover of childhood, but was not in any sexual sense the pedophile that some claim him to have been. It's a similar defense many provide for Michael Jackson, that his obsession with boys, deep-seated and obsessive as it was, had no physical aspect to it. But Piers Dudgeon, in his more damning biography, Neverland, J.M. Barrie, The Du Mauriers, and The Dark Side of Peter Pan, thinks differently, digging up incriminating evidence that there was more to Barrie's attachment to the Davies children than simple protective friendship. First, there are the letters he wrote to Michael Llewellyn Davies, who is often thought of as Barrie's favourite Davies child. On the eve of Michael's 8th birthday in June 1908, Barrie wrote, I wish I could be with you and your candles. You can look at me as one of your candles, the one that burns badly, the greasy one that is bent in the middle. But still, hooray, I am Michael's candle. I wish I could see you putting on the red skin clothes for the first time. Dear Michael, I am very fond of you, but don't tell anybody. And then there is the matter of Barrie becoming the boy's guardian. Arthur Llewellyn Davies died from cancer of the jaw in 1907, and Sylvia died from lung cancer in 1910. Sylvia had left a handwritten document that said, what I would like would be if Jenny would come to Mary, and that the two together would be looking after the boys and the house. Mary was the boy's nanny, Jenny was Mary's sister. Barrie transcribed the will himself and sent it to the boy's maternal grandmother, altering Jenny to Jimmy, so it appeared that Sylvia wished for him to become the boy's guardian. Intentional, or just a really convenient accident? Regardless, the children became his to care for. But amid all these machinations, there is, as of yet, no hard evidence that Barrie ever physically abused his children. However, you would assume that if there was some kind of sexual abuse in the home, that it would have some psychological effects on the boys. And it did. Both George and Peter volunteered to serve in World War I. Some historians think it was a way for the young men to get away from Barrie. Sadly, George was found dead in Belgium with a gunshot wound to the head. He was only 21 years old. Michael was also 21 years old when he was found dead. He drowned along with another young man, known to be his lover, in what many biographers think was a suicide pact. The drowning occurred in a section of Thames River called Sandford Lock that was notorious for dangerous currents. And then, in 1960, at the age of 63, Peter Llewellyn Davies threw himself under a train. This was right after he destroyed almost all the letters from Barry to the Davies boys, saying they were simply too much. Peter also hated to be associated with Barry's work, calling Peter Pan a terrible masterpiece. Time to take a look at the story itself and see if there are any connections to child abuse, sex, or pedophilia. And the connection is right in the title. Peter Pan. Pan is the demonic pagan god of sexual perversion, pedophilia, and rape. He is also portrayed roaming through the forests, penis erect, drunk and lascivious, frolicking with nymphs and piping his way through the wild. We might say he ruled the lower nature of man, its rebellious and animal side. The attributes or symbols associated with Pan are woods, pastures, umbrellas, phallus, and the flute, also called the pan flute. He is depicted with goat's feet and 2 horns, and wearing a lynx pelt. Pan is also the god of music, the god of goats and sheep and their shepherds. He is the deceiver, known for luring lost souls. Like the god Pan, Peter also has a pan flute, but it goes much deeper than just that. Barry himself admitted that he was cursed in one of his stories referring to the occult. His curse was being a homosexual pedophile. Back in the days, just being a homosexual was considered sinful. So he wrote Peter Pan as a confession of his desires and a protest to the very restrictive Victorian society he lived in. As I mentioned, the god Pan from the Roman times is a pattern of our modern Satan. Hooves and horns. The Roman Pan represents unbridled sexuality, like a goat has, a celebration for taboo sexuality. In 1990, J.M. Barrie wrote a novel called Tommy and Grizzle about a toxic marriage, which he wrote 6 years into his marriage with Ansel. Grizzle, I seem to be different from all other men. There seems to be a curse upon me. You are the only woman I've ever wanted to love, but apparently I can't. Shortly after their divorce, Mary Ansell wrote this about her ex-husband. Love, in its fullest scene, could never be felt by him or experienced, and biographer Piers Dudgeon believes to this date that they never consummated their marriage. Yes, Peter Pan is a book celebrating pedophilia, and those who are familiar with the history of the author and the symbolism he uses know this. In a recent adaptation of Peter Pan, written by Jason Fuchs, a member of the Screenwriting Guild who is also rumored to be gay, the film starts with actual child trafficking. A Catholic orphanage is selling children as slaves to pirates. Very strange indeed. It is also very interesting to note other movies that feature the Pan connection, like Guillermo del Toro's Pan's Labyrinth. A faun that looks an awful lot like Pan in a movie called Pan's Labyrinth introduces himself to a little girl. I've been called so many names that only the wind and the trees can pronounce. He then continues by telling the girl that he will take her to an underground kingdom where she'll be a princess. This story has the same core theme as Peter Pan, escaping the reality of a strict fascist society. Pan also made an appearance in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe as a faun called Tumnus. Lucy Pavensikta and Mr. Tumnus' character and their subtle interaction give the impression of a pedophile trying to lure a little girl into his house. The whole scene between the two of them is creepy, and the spirit of pedophilia is definitely at work in this movie. Tumnus represents Pan, as is evident by his appearance, his umbrella, and his magic flute. The god of pedophilia and rape trying to seduce a young girl. When Lucy goes to Tumnus' house, Tumnus plays a magical tune that makes Lucy fall asleep. When she wakes up, Tumnus is panicking, saying, "What have I done? What the hell?" The connection between Pan and pedophilia cannot be more obvious in this scene. The fact that Tumnus is modeled after Pan, one of the most sexually perverted gods in witchcraft, doesn't bode well for Walt Disney's intentions. There are many other instances of Pan appearing in pop culture and even in children's literature. But as I mentioned earlier, he isn't always known as Pan. This character, demon or god, appears throughout many different cultures and religions as the horned god Moloch, Baphomet, Khnum, Raphan, Osiris, and Beelzebub. Today he is more commonly known as Baphomet or Moloch to most Westerners, and is also worshipped by modern pagans. A clear connection between Pan and Baphomet can be made when looking at the works of infamous pagan Aleister Crowley. I rave, and I rape, and I rip, and I rend, everlasting world without end, mannequin, maiden, Maynard, man, in the might of Pan. Hymns to Pan, 1929. But it doesn't end there. There are so many cases of Hollywood and Disney using these symbolisms in their films, some of which I might discuss at a later date. But once you understand who Pan is and what other names he is called, things will start to make a hell of a lot more sense. His image, likeness, and symbolism will usually be used as a protest against social norms, religion, sexual preference, you name it. Pedophilia is very common in animation, pop culture, and enjoyed by a large part of the world elite. So, without showing you evidence that the US government is involved in child and human trafficking and pedophilia, if I asked you right now, would you say that it is a possibility that they are involved? Because there is plenty of evidence to link some of United States' most powerful political personnel to pedophilia and human trafficking. But I encourage you to do your own research and look into it. I'm Mr. Gunk. Thank you for watching. Goodbye. Hey guys, I just wanted to use this opportunity to pimp out my Patreon. For those of you who are unfamiliar with my channel or are new here, a lot of my videos deal with very controversial and shocking topics. And that means some of the videos that I spent weeks on researching and editing are not advertiser friendly. So that's why I created my Patreon page, so that people that really like my content and have a little bit of money to spare can support me directly. So head on over to my Patreon page and check it out. All supporters are treated equal, so it doesn't matter if you donate $1 or $50 a month, it really helps. Thanks guys.